Good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to give you a warm welcome today to our webinar, which is hosted on behalf of the Worshipful Company of Furniture Makers. So my name is Peter Holland. I'm the founding director of Linear Structure, and I'm really delighted to be hosting and chairing the webinar today because I help sales managers every day to work with their teams to improve top performance. So it's a real pleasure to be hosting this with an expert panel this morning to dive into this subject about the shape of selling to come and how can we equip a modern sales team. So why don't I introduce you to the panel? So I have with me Nichola Bell, and Nichola is the sales director from Westbridge Furniture. Good morning, Nichola.
Morning, Peter. Morning, everyone.
I've also got Chris Dixon, who's the head of sales development at MillerKnoll. Good morning, Chris.
Morning, everybody.
I'm also joined by Andrea Hillier from Blum UK. Andrea is the retail sales manager for Blum.
Morning.
Morning. And Sam, good morning to you. Sam Jackson, who's joining us as the commercial manager or director, should I say, from Bluebone Furniture. So good morning, Sam.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Peter.
Pleasure. So we're going to have a good discussion this morning. But just before we dive into this topic, if you're unfamiliar with the furniture makers as an organisation, we are the furnishing charity for the industry. So the sort of things that as a London livery company we get involved with are education, championing good design and manufacture, and also representing the sector to government, and also making sure that we're sort of at the forefront of international competition. So just to give you an opportunity as well, we were thinking that to try and make this interactive for the audience as well, you may be at home or in your office and you have a question. So if you'd like to post in Q&A your question, even if we don't get to it today, we'll follow up and we'd love to have those questions to see what's relevant and really useful to you in this topic. So we've kind of discussed this amongst ourselves and chosen sort of 3 or 4 topics that we think are really relevant and impactful on a day-to-day basis for you and your sales teams. And with such dramatic change over the last 18 months, 2 years, it's really looking at what does the shape of selling look like? And how can we equip those teams to achieve top performance? So maybe we could open up the discussion, guys, and just have a chat about, the future shape of a sales organization. Do you think that there are some roles that have changed now because of this? Are there some lessons that you've learned from the pandemic to improve your performance? I don't know. Maybe we'll start off at that point. Never lost for words, you guys.
Well, my personal view is I don't think that there has to be an awful lot that needs to change per se about the individuals that you get into the organisation to help support the sales function. Because at the end of the day, sales has always been, for hundreds and hundreds of years, about relationships. And once you've got a relationship with somebody and you can then instill, or you've got that trust, there is always that opportunity to be able to get in front of that customer again in whatever format. It just may be that some of the ways that we get in front of customers has changed. Yeah,
so that's a really, really sound point. Thank you. Very good. So what about also looking at the roles? I know, Andrea, we were talking about earlier, like some different ways to leverage the external people and the internal people.
We within have an additional internal sales support.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so we've taken on during this period our first internal, it's a customer relationship assistant, we're calling it, because it's very much about that relationship Sam's talking about. It's keeping that contact with the customer, as we know in this industry, certainly the world's gone crazy and we can't keep up with everything. So the sales guys are very much in demand at the moment. So having that supportive role for us means that the internal person can take on queries for orders, chasing items for them. But at the same time, we want them to sort of build that relationship with the customer so we're not losing it, and build more relationships within each customer as well. So in each company, we can have more contact. So one salesperson can't always keep up with everybody, especially at the moment. It's crazy.
Definitely. That's interesting. I mean, have you guys seen expectation from customers change over this period of time?
We've our structure has mainly remained unchanged through the pandemic in terms of our sales structure, but there's more emphasis on digital access and content needed. As a white label manufacturer, we need to be able to enable our customers to sell their brand. So what has changed is giving them the correct tools, and it's the tools that have changed.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Very good.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You know, and then that goes back to the relationship side with regards to the fact that if you're looking at social and digital media, the most powerful tool is in social media is remarketing, and remarketing isn't really any different to the strategic process that we've adapted over the years with the hunter-harvester approach in the customer base and in the sales process.
Yeah, good. Chris, how have you been finding it?
Yeah, well, I think what the last 18 months has shown is that companies that haven't adapted and haven't changed haven't been as successful as other companies have been during the last 18 months, 2 years. And what I mean from a sales perspective is that, sales, traditionally has been about relationships, relationship building, being face-to-face. And I think salespeople now have to be right at the top of their game and be multi-channel. So social media, your presence on social media, how you convey yourself, what you talk about is really important. So coming up with innovation, storytelling, new ideas, not necessarily just promoting your company, your products and your services, but having really good, compelling stories and hooks to engage with the marketplace, new prospects, etc. And in terms of new roles, we've been going through a restructure for two reasons. One is because we've just bought our biggest competitor and we're going through a huge merger over the last 6 months. But we're also restructuring from the perspective of that we've realized that we need to, and we can also change to optimize our sales structure and our sales process. So, for example, in the UK and in other countries, we deal through a huge dealer network. And in the UK, we have 60 dealers. And now with 30 of those dealers, instead of working through the traditional face-to-face approach with the sales team, we've taken 30 of those and we're dealing with them on a much more virtual basis. We have remapped sales processes and we're looking at different ways of working with them. We've looked at nearly 50 day-to-day sales activities and engagements, which we're remapping and reprocessing and give them a digital virtual option. It could be anything from presenting a product through to a customer meeting, and anything like that, though, through to an internal process, which eventually ends up with the customer, just really optimizing everything that we do. So I think, companies do need to change. There's a big difference between the ones that haven't. We certainly have, and it's resulted in new roles as well, I think. And I think the sales team, the sales people really need to be at the top of their game to add value to that face-to-face process when it's necessary, but also be multi-channel, like marketing always has been and should be, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're all seeing this, the sales and marketing kind of idea of having separate channels or teams, and it really doesn't work anymore, does it? They're so close; they have to be working together now, and it's more like a revenue team that's working together to achieve the goals. So that's a really interesting thought, that about adding value across whatever channel that you are working in. So I'm just thinking about when you look at the skills that are required then from salespeople moving forward, are there ones that have kind of jumped out to you that are really critical that companies and individuals, if they want to develop their career, they should be thinking about because of all these changes?
I think what we noticed was sometimes we can be accused of being in a cottage industry, which...
Oh, just froze for a second. Might come back to... I'll come back to Nichola in a second if she reconnects. Yeah. So does anyone else want to carry on that thought? We just
customers.
Sorry, we lost you for a minute, so you might. That's all right. Just back up the bus 30 seconds.
And you were doing so well.
Yeah.
Shall I start again?
Yeah, do.
So we need to teach our customers and help them along the journey with us. So the pandemic gave us a really, really exciting opportunity to embrace change that I don't think would have come, maybe eventually, but not at the speed that it did. And I think that gave us the opportunity to try new things and bring our customers with us. And that very base of customer that we have, it was quite obvious early on who was embracing change with us and who wasn't. So the skill set of my sales team, and myself included, had to change. How could we get in front of our customers when we couldn't traditionally get in the car and go and see them? So it's a case of needing to be more commercially agile and to be able to read market changes quite quickly.
Yeah, definitely. And how have you found the response from customers? You mentioned that there's like a difference. And Chris, you mentioned like there's companies that are willing to adapt. There's others that, dare I say it, think that things are going to go back to 2019, right? I know this sounds crazy, but I'm still hearing from people that are saying, when all this blows over, I'll be back in my car. Right? I'll be back in my car. And I'm getting worried about that because to me, that is not seizing the opportunity that I see you talking about here. Are you finding that as well?
Was that to Chris?
No, to any of you.
And I think that there's a real opportunity here to try and help, as Nichola was alluding to, with giving different tools and different advice and different structures, is that effectively with the sales team, you need to be giving them a time management tool to be able to say to them that, as you've just said, can't get in the car and drive for 5 days a week. You've got to pre-plan your visits now and make sure that you've got a visit. When have you got a visit? And effectively maybe have a simple process, which might start with that presentation that Chris and Nichola have been talking about, which may be tailor-made to a particular customer. You have that presentation, then it's followed up with an email or a phone call, and then potentially a visit that's on a scheduled basis. So the sales team need to understand that they have got to keep their out of office up to date. You know, are we in the office today? Are we out of the office today? Where are we? And that communication does become key at the start of every day and at the start of every week with everybody that they may or may not have come into contact with or are about to come into contact with.
Yeah, that's interesting. So from what you're talking about, it sounds almost like you need to have a multi-option approach to customers. So
yes,
when you start to think about this transition of working in a hybrid way, maybe sort of almost giving the option of a face-to-face or a virtual meeting or a phone call or an email, and then for the sales team to actually think, hang on, which of these engagements requires a face-to-face? And there will definitely be that situation, won't there? You need to speak to them, go and see them. But how many of those engagements on a weekly basis could be done like we're doing now, saving you 2 hours plus traveling time and everything. So
Yeah.
what do you think the impact of that would be on an organisation?
I was just going to say, Peter, I think that topic's been interesting to me for at least a decade. 15 years ago, when I was managing a territory and I was a sales rep myself, driving around doing 45, 50,000 miles a year, I was thinking, if you times me by however many salespeople there are in the UK, how much windscreen time and money is that down the drain? It's not sustainable. And I, in some ways, look at the last 18 months and think that's just an acceleration of what was going to happen really slowly anyway. Sooner or later, companies were going to realize that it's not sustainable, it's a loss of money, and there are probably better and more efficient ways of doing things. So we need to restructure things, remap our sales processes, which is what we've been doing the last year or so. But in terms of salespeople skills, I think it's important to, fully equip your sales team. Face-to-face is only important where it's important, if you see what I mean, where it's really going to make a difference and add value. And there are so many other alternatives until you get to that point. What we're focusing on, for example, now is trying to get with the emergence of e-commerce over the last sort of 20 years and digitization happening, customers sometimes engage with sales teams and salespeople later on in the buying process. So what we're trying to focus on is getting people involved earlier on in the process and leading with insights and thoughts, and thinking about things that customers might not have thought about to try and reach their goals and their needs. And we're looking at a multi-pronged approach of upskilling people with social media, upskilling people with their presentation skills, because traditionally they're very much used to doing that face-to-face, and it's a very different experience. And you also have a lot of different opportunities and skills that you can acquire doing it virtually, and different ways that you can use Teams and Zoom and things like that. We're also trying to push people ahead with their sales career development and professionalizing that. So we're linking up with the Institute of Sales Professionals and working with a lot of their training packages, which they can do in their own time, CPDs, etc., to gain CPD points, like you would do if you're an accountant or physiotherapist and things like that, sales ethics exams. But just understanding the sort of like the whole picture of sales as a professional vocation, and how they can take it forwards and acquire new skills and apply them to the current environment that we're working in. So they're not just focusing on the driving around face-to-face meetings, who am I seeing next approach, but more, how can I optimize what I'm doing and spend my time in the best way possible and learn new skills along the way.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting.
And I think there's a flip side to that as well, though, Chris, because often you get if you want to develop product or develop a look or take things on, often you get a lot of feedback from your sales team suggesting that they've seen this out in the market, or they've seen this somewhere else, or so whilst we should be considering the downtime that's had with driving, I think there's still a place for being out in front of a customer and seeing what else that customer is doing. Otherwise, everything could then become quite stagnant and everything look a bit samey, as it possibly has when people have gone to recent exhibitions and it's just a rollout of the same style of something but with a different finish on or a different color, or because that's what's in today. So that bit I think is crucial from a broader business perspective to be able to make sure that businesses move on. So the sales team are important there for the feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where face-to-face adds value, doesn't it? Yeah.
I think it's quite evident that we're in a hybrid selling platform now. So, and it's about embracing the old and embracing the new and nurturing the old, dependent on our customer and their technical abilities, really. So, and I think, Peter, what you were saying is, are we going to go back to the old? We will if we let it. So I think as leaders, it's up to us to keep pushing forward and maintaining those skills that we learned during lockdown, and that knowledge, and also providing ourselves to sales teams with the tools that they require. So make it easy. Not everybody got into Zoom meetings, and not everybody was comfortable with it. We did virtual showroom tours. That was exciting. That was something different. Camera shy, yes, didn't like much of it, but did it because we still want to get in front of our customers. Video appointments, great. Sales videos, online exhibitions. That was something we never would have embraced before. As I say, it's just pushed us along. So it is up to us to maintain that and keep those changes going. There is always going to be an element of people wanting to go back to what they're comfortable with. And it does really depend on the product type that you're selling as well. So there is an element of certain aspects that they want to sit on a sofa, touch it, feel it, is it comfortable? And we love that. We want to see our customers, and I personally want to be in front of them at an exhibition. But it's reiterating that hybrid selling platform of embracing both of it at the same time.
Yeah, no, I think, excuse me, no, I think you're absolutely right. And thanks for bringing that point up about the tools. Because one of the projects I was working on recently was to enable this team to work like this. But when I started to dig into what marketing and other content was available, it became really evident quickly there wasn't the tool set. So going back to what you were saying, Chris, what we were trying to do was create almost like this digital toolkit, so that when you do a presentation like this, there are huge opportunities, aren't there? If I could go bring up a case study or show you a short video or bring up a whiteboard with some key points that we could both notate at the same time, this interaction suddenly becomes extremely interactive. Because what the challenge I'm seeing is that it isn't interactive like face-to-face. So you have to create the content. Would you agree with that, Chris?
Yeah, that's what I was touching on. Really, there are a lot more opportunities with the virtual interaction, I think, than people realise, and we've understood that. I've certainly understood that and learned that more over the last year, partly because we've had a company that's come in and helped train us with it, and how to present virtually and what's possible with it. Rather than sitting behind, at the end of the day, it is the same as face to face. You are the presentation. You don't sit behind a PowerPoint, you don't sit behind a product, but at the same time, you can use those tools virtually to add value to the presentation if you're doing it in the right way. But there are a lot of opportunities with virtual. But again, face to face is just as, if not more important, for all the aforementioned regions that Nichola and Sam mentioned. Where it adds value, it's really important. If it's not going to add value over a virtual meeting, then there are other ways of engaging with the customer.
Yeah, I know, Andrea, we were talking about the interesting point that during this whole period, you were encouraging your team to still maintain that contact because of the changes that were taking place on the customer's needs and what was happening in their business.
Yeah, certainly. It's essential, that contact for us. However, obviously there's no physical contact to begin with, and we'll never come away from the human contact. But we've had, we now have customers that say to us, well, we can meet like this now and probably come and see me physically once a year. I'm happy with that because that suits me better. I've got more time for that, and we can have digital for the rest of the year. And I was saying to Peter yesterday, we've got one particular customer that now him and his salesperson chat after 6 o'clock while they're both cooking their dinner. That works best for them. So we've got some really different ways of connecting with the customers at the moment, for sure. But I think it's important, though, that for the sales team to keep, they've got to be responsible for how they work that and what is important, and the slight fear of making sure that they don't automatically go, I need to be out today, because you do, since we've opened up a bit more, there was more, we're out today. You've got to keep looking at that. Is it necessary? Because we have managed without that calls to customers, do my 4 calls a day. So it's important that they take that responsibility. And for us, as we are going back out on the road, the importance of making sure the customers had us sort of very accessible during this time. So we've been answering questions. It's been great. They've been able to get hold of us quicker and easier. We respond quicker. But as we are going back out on the road, setting that example, the expectation that the customer knows that we're not necessarily going to have that service to them, at the touch of a button and an instant reaction. So that's important, that we're keeping them informed, that if, like I think someone else said, making sure that we are out of office is correct, or, that's so important for us now. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned 2 things that I thought were really interesting in the conversation, because one is customer expectation, and they're used to rapid responses, right? If you're sitting at a computer,
they have been now.
In my conversations with sales teams over the last few months, they've been telling me how stressed they're finding things now, because that expectation's up here, but they can't deliver it because they're maybe driving down the motorway, they've got 3 or 4 meetings, they can see emails coming in, phone calls, and it's just like overwhelm. So we had a conversation with them about resetting expectations and also maybe improving the relationship and the expectations, similar to what you were talking about. Why does a call at 6 o'clock while he's cooking dinner work for him? Have you got any thoughts on how your teams could do that? How could they get that connection with the customer and working out where the expectations should be?
I think it's got to be led by the customer and their expectations and their willingness, really. It was very evident to us that I tended always to use the phrase of, we'll see who is swimming naked when the tide goes out. And it's been fairly evident. So in terms of who was embracing change and those customers that want to carry on with that change, we found the expectation of a particular group of our customers that were quite tech savvy, and they wanted instant information in terms of seeing new product, for instance. So a traditional day would be that a customer would come up and we'd put a prototype in front of them, we'd all sit around, touch it, feel it, sit on it. Well, the need for newness and a new product to the market didn't stop because of the pandemic. It actually increased. And the speed to market, we saw a huge difference that way. So from a group perspective, they wanted that connection even quicker. It has sort of gone back to the old, but not fully. They still now want to come up and touch it, feel it, sit on it, but they want it as quickly as they were having it virtually. So it is a fine balance of our sales roles, managing customers' expectations as well, because we all know the challenges that we've going through and are going through at the moment of supply chain and delays and such. So it's making sure the expectation of the customer is realistic as well. And nobody wants to see me cooking and chatting at the same time.
Could get messy.
I think, Nichola, that we potentially experience something similar, because a lot of our customer base and our customers' customer base do want to touch, see, smell, feel something that's physical. So whilst doing all the remote things and that customer expectation of the remote things and having it the next week or in 4 weeks' time when they've seen something, but they do actually want to touch and feel it first, and you've got to get out there and touch and feel it. Maybe we've got to be really thinking about what we need to do to convert something that is, and I spoke with Peter about this, that is 2-dimensional when you're on a screen. It can look 3D, but it's 2-dimensional. And we've got to convert that into a 3-dimensional something a lot quicker. So is it a comfort pack? We've got to send out a piece of fabric with the color, with the foam underneath or whatever, because they'll trust you that you'll get the in your particular instance the rake right and everything like that. But they don't necessarily trust that fabric if it's a new fabric or whatever, that they'd want to see the fabric. So do we have to be a bit more savvy about getting some kind of something physical out in the post that isn't the chair that you can get around to them, and maybe there is a halfway house there?
Yeah, that's interesting. That was one of the questions actually from the Q&A panel. They were asking, with this whole digital thing, that's fine, right? But you're selling chairs and sofas. So at what point can that help you? Or do you think there's an area, you mentioned sort of that idea of having a comfort pack, is that kind of a halfway solution maybe to getting over that? Because ultimately, do you feel that with furniture like you manufacture, that there isn't really another option in terms of getting face-to-face and then seeing it and trying it out?
If I can step in there, I think I certainly experienced existing customers were happy for me to send fabrics over so they can touch them, feel them. But they already knew and expected the quality that we produce. As long-standing customers, they kind of knew what to expect in terms of our sit and so on and so forth. And we were very lucky to have that experience. I think the challenge would have come for new customers or prospects not knowing who we were and what to expect. And I think that would revert back to the old ways. Yeah,
very interesting. So there's one other area that I wanted to talk about with you, and that is to do with this massive change. And I think the sales department probably are the ones that have been most affected by moving to virtual in the way that they work. Is how does someone that has for years and years been used to being out face to face, there's a whole dynamic, there's a rhythm, there's motivation. Generally salespeople want to be out there seeing people, and now they've moved to this hybrid situation. Do you think that there are certain challenges that you've seen, or that you feel that as managers we need to try and help people to keep productivity, to actually make the hybrid model work for them?
If I can step in quickly there, I think one thing that we found incredibly useful and helpful, and we tend to work with agents more than reps, but what we tended to do was on a weekly basis, we had what we would call a Friday afternoon catch up and a glass of wine. So it was like 4:00 on a Friday afternoon, we would just sit and get everybody on a Zoom meeting to chat about, it was good for the mental health as well, because if you hadn't been out, because we've got people in Wales, they were locked down for longer than us. But it was that opportunity of getting people together to be able to talk about what they may have spoken to their customer base about over the phone, what they may have seen when they've been out, because not everybody had been out on a specific time. And I think if we can maintain doing something like that on a weekly basis rather than just on a quarterly like we were doing, but so we had more regular face-to-face team meetings than we did historically. So I think it's important that we keep that going.
Okay, interesting.
I've seen a difference in have I frozen game?
No. All good.
In different individuals actually, and somewhere where we're trying to break the cycle of having to go out and do so many calls, because let's face it, it does feel a little old-fashioned now. And it's a case of sitting down and spending some time creating more tools, information, data that can be sent to customers rather than sitting on the motorway with as Chris was saying. And some have embraced it more than others. So we're going through a process at the moment of sharing best practice, what's worked better for some, and sharing it with others that maybe just need a little nudge to embrace the newness. Good, very, very good, strong, experienced sales teams, and you do what you do well, but you can do new things well as well.
Yeah, I think we found that initially everybody struggled with it because it wasn't what they do. We're salespeople, we need to be out on the road. But I think actually in the end, the conversations and the way that they're having meetings and the time that they're having, which that they would be using drive in between calls, their work is far more involved. The customer journeys are a lot more in detail. They're getting into more information from the customers, and they are spending actually better time when they're talking to them than they were, perhaps because they're thinking, I've got to get off to the next call, and then there's time in between visits. But it certainly has actually improved in that section. So we've been lucky that in the end, all on board, they've all ended up actually identifying that they can be more effective this way, even though there will still be calls physically, but they can do it. And in fact, now they're saying, well, we're so busy, I've got so much going on with this customer that they wouldn't have had probably before. So it's been, yeah, very good, but started off with a lot of fear, I think, initially.
And I think fear is the biggest thing, isn't it? If you can give your sales team that opportunity that, yes, we will support training in this particular area, or we will support you learning doing this. The biggest thing in life per se is the fear factor, and then what do you do about it afterwards? So if you can eradicate that fear from a particular process or system, then I think everybody's onto a winner, really.
I think it's interesting because I think the fear factor kicked in March, April last year. Business fell off the edge of a cliff. People weren't going to meetings. Everything happened online. And I think people learn very quickly how not to do things. So they learned how to do it right by learning how not to do it. And I think it wasn't actually until this year that we started implementing a new structure, remapping sales processes and training our sales team so that they could see what was possible. And when they feel empowered by understanding the new structure, what we're aiming to achieve, having the training to be able to get there, then they become enthused about it and they can use those tools. And like Nichola was saying, they can make best use of their time. So, that time spent on the motorway, they could spend, 20 minutes or even an hour preparing for a presentation or a meeting that they're going to have virtually. And then they've also got the tools, skills and ability to be able to implement them in that meeting. Even down to, somebody mentioned it earlier on, virtual showroom tours. We found that doing that is a really good lead in now to getting people in the showroom, because people want to know what they're going to see sometimes before they get there. Is it going to be worth my time? Take them around a virtual tour, present it really well. Oh, this looks great. Now I'd like to actually sit on that sofa or use that desk or something like that, so.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, actually. So really what I'm hearing from you is that you've been able to help the team to break away from, say, copying and pasting, a full work day to working at home, which doesn't work. It's not sustainable long term, to breaking the day up, making it a hybrid experience that they can enjoy and actually end up more productive. There's one question in the panel here that I'd like to just share with you. It's kind of on the back of your comment there, Chris. Question from Andy Barnett says, with the change to a more digital contact and less face-to-face, where do we see the importance of showrooms and ensuring that the level of footfall remains at a viable level? So there's a question. I think you partly answered it, Chris, with your thought about the virtual tours. Have any of you been doing virtual tours on showrooms, or
on the showroom side of things as well for the product area that we're involved with? I would suggest that quite a lot of customers can't visualize what it is that they want, not necessarily our customers, but our customers, what they want in their own homes. And it's that visualization of walking in somewhere and thinking, oh, that would look great in my new living room or my redecorated dining room or wherever, whatever room in the house it is. And so what I think will become increasingly important is collaboration between businesses, because where somebody may just sell upholstery or somebody may just sell occasional furniture, what we've learned is that we can help the retailers in their showrooms with, if they collaborate with a lot of businesses, with the fact that they can actually present an offer that the end consumer will be able to just pick up and lift and put into their house. So I think showrooms would still be important. There's still a place for showrooms.
Yeah.
I think for us, although we don't call it a showroom, we call it our experience centre, it still is our one biggest asset that if we can get somebody there to us, it's the best thing we can do. And actually, since we've opened up, we've absolutely been full. So, I mean, we have strict COVID procedures and we make sure that we put that in place and we advance information to the customer. But it's, the requirement for it, we're having more people asking about it and how soon can we get to see you. So it's still important that we keep that. I think there is that, the physical of touch it, feel it, experience it. Well, I can't see that. Hopefully it'll never go, but we've also using that same space during this time. We have some customers, for example, in Scotland that want training. The COVID is different at the moment there. So we were able to travel, but they weren't so comfortable with us going into their showrooms and mixing a lot of the showrooms together. So we've used the space though, instead of we could do a walk round with them, but we've done some videos for them. And then we're going to hold training where we pull in the videos to show them what we're talking about as we go along. But, there's lots of different ways we can still use the showroom if we can't physically have anybody there. But we certainly feel that it's still so important for us to get people inside.
And that reverts back to the omni-channel experience, doesn't it? Of here's the digital, here's the email, here's the telephone call. Yes, would you like to come into the showroom now? Or yeah. Mm-hmm.
Peter, I think it depends on the gentleman's question if he was directing it to a manufacturer's showroom or a retail showroom, because I think that's also divided by their demographic of their own customer base. I think it was evident during the first lockdown of, for instance, only 50% of my independent customers had transactional websites. So they were out of the game for a good chunk of it. And those that really serviced the older generation that weren't particularly or perhaps confident to buy online also suffered. So it does depend on the demographic of their own customer, if it's a retailer that was asking the question.
Yeah, maybe just go back to you, Chris. Because I know you guys did a big piece on virtual. How have you kind of put that into your sales process, and how is it working? Sort of linking back to that question and making footfall viable, etc.
Yeah, I think one of the things that obviously we've been bringing people into the showroom on the back of, or previously having shown them the virtual tour, but I think it's a bit like your virtual meeting. It's preparing it specifically for that customer. So, it's also sort of links back to the question about customer expectations. I think, they want to see things in our showroom that they might not necessarily have or have thought about in their own space. For example, sustainability, from the perspective of, the sustainability of the product, but also how sustainable is this specific curated setting for the future. Something that people are really interested in at the moment is not making the same mistake with their office where, they have to change it again in 5 years' time or 3 years' time if something else happens. So how can they have a hackable workspace? How can they have something which is sustainable and agile and can be reformed and reused in a different way in the future? So using the showroom to meet the specific customer and marketplace requirements is really, really important, rather than just having your product in there. Having zones where you create a setting, you have a story around it, you can explain it, and also, before people buy something, they're going to want to use it, touch it, feel it, like everybody said. But making the showroom specific for what's going on in the market at the moment makes it a more compelling story, I think, rather than just thinking, oh, this is somewhere that we have our products.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think that's such an important point. So really, what I'm hearing from what you just said is that the showroom is an opportunity for you to add that value, is to come up with new ideas, things that I hadn't thought about, right? It's not just displaying my product. It's showing me the application of the ideas, the thought process that I should be thinking about. And then it becomes a really, really valuable asset in that whole process. So that's really interesting. I've just got one final question, because time is running away with us. Roland Smith asked, how do you feel that getting leads has changed in the last couple of years? So that's an interesting topic. Have a think about that for a minute. We kind of touched on it a little bit. I mean, personally, I've seen the Chris's point about salespeople being able to be engaging on social media has become really, really important, where perhaps, if I'm honest, they probably weren't that strong before, and they were doing little bits of here and there, but the content level wasn't there. How do you feel that is impacting leads or lead generation?
Well, I think that online information sources and the social media is often the catalyst to bringing something else. So if, again, it goes back to partnerships, PR, who you're talking to, where you might be exhibiting, going back to what Chris was saying about having stories. If you've got those stories and things that you can pop on there as well, and there's something that's very in now. So, the biggest things, obviously with our particular market at the moment is freight prices, and then you've got raw material prices. But if you can ping something then that's a way of being able to get leads. But as far as your keywords for then bringing people onto your website and things would be the biggest virtual way, I think, of being able to get new leads.
Cool. Chris, is there anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a few workshops where we look at, the list of different ways that we can get leads we've mapped out. It's huge and it's never ending. But I would say from a digital perspective or a social media perspective, I think you're right. Historically, people have sort of skimmed across the surface of what could be done with it. They put a post on about their company, or they put a post on about their new product or something, or an event that's coming up. But really, I think what people need to do is put content on, for example, LinkedIn, that asks a question or prompts a question, or pulls people in some way. So it's not necessarily, this is what we do. Are you interested? It could be something completely different. What do you think of that? People will comment. And in that, you end up in a conversation with them. So leads happen through social networking, through conversations about interesting topics. It could be something about a completely different company in a different industry that's, this is what they're doing. Isn't it fantastic? What do you think? This is what kept this company up at night. This is how they solved it. What do you think? What are your experiences? And just it's engaging in that social conversation rather than just thinking of it as a transactional space where you put something there and hope to get a hook. And then that develops relationships, like people said, relationships, people buy from people, and you end up in that conversation.
I think it's really important that you've got the consistency across all the social media, whether it's something that you've pinged out to your existing customer base as far as what it is that you're doing today, or something that you've put on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, because that is what creates the familiarity and people wanting to find out more because they've seen you on that post in that media and that post in that media.
Yeah, I think so. And also what I've found has really been effective for a lot of people is the fact is that people don't necessarily want to read just the corporate stuff.
Exactly.
You need it curated, right? So if I send you the post, but I said to you, Chris, just seen this article, thinking about what our discussion the other day on XYZ, then it's relevant, isn't it? It's someone's curated it, someone's thought it through. They haven't just passed it out to millions of people. They've thought about you, and then there's an engagement. And I think then it's up to us, as a company to create great content, but then give them the opportunity to personalize it. Do you think that's true, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally agree with what Sam was saying about consistency across platforms. I also think that's why salespeople now need to be multidisciplinary in terms of their approach, as does marketing. But that's another important thing. It's even more important now that sales and marketing are aligned and that things happen concurrently. There's a structure, whether it's a seasonal rollout, monthly or whatever, as to how we're approaching the market together, but making them use of your different platforms. For example, you can go from people, there's a question that was sort of prompted today about, do people follow the traditional sales, do customers follow the traditional sales process or buying process? And I mean, I think that stopped years ago. You don't go in the top of the funnel and come out the bottom. They bounce around all over the place, from different social media platforms to different engagements for salespeople to seeing different events. And I think you need to be consistent, like Sam was saying, across all of your different platforms, because you could go from LinkedIn to Instagram. Once you're on Instagram, if you're selling retail, people can actually shop a picture. So a family member of mine's got a business, web development business, and they're setting up pictures on Instagram for inspiration, but then you can actually go and click on the products and buy them. So in terms of lead generation, that might have started somewhere. That might have started on LinkedIn or Facebook or somewhere like that, and ended up somebody buying something on Instagram. So yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Well, sadly, we kind of run out of time today. So I just wanted to thank all of you, Chris and Nichola and Sam and Andrea, for sharing all of your experiences. I kind of just captured maybe a couple of key takeaways. One was that we're really looking to reevaluate the needs of the customers, what they need, and then embrace those hybrid opportunities really that we have to make things a lot more productive for everybody, for the customer, for our sales teams. The second one is actually the core values haven't changed. Yeah. The human side, the honesty, the integrity, the relationship building that you either do face-to-face or virtually, that hasn't changed. So fundamentally, we still got the same things to work with. But what we do need to do is give our teams the tools to be able to work like this. It's very, very important that we create those tools. And then lastly, that we try and maximize their performance in a hybrid model. So help them to see that this is a massive sort of transfer of the way that you've worked. So you can work differently. Yeah, taking that hour to prep for the meeting instead of driving 2 hours. This kind of mental process and giving them some space to adapt to that new reality. So really, I just want to thank you all for sharing all of your insights today. It's been a really interesting conversation. It's sparked some ideas maybe for a future webinar looking at that sort of sales and marketing and how we bring those two teams together as well. Now, obviously, there's a few questions that are still left here that I don't have time for, so we will answer those. We will do a summary that we'll send out as well as the recording. So if you didn't get to watch or get your question answered, then we will cover it. But thank you very much for all your time today and your efforts and sharing with us. And it was a pleasure to be your chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.